let's see. Okay, we are live now. Okay, looks like we've got a pretty small group here right now, but we've got a few people here. So if you're here, go ahead and say hello, and let's go ahead and get started with the review. So go ahead and get us some, get us some questions in there. Get us some questions. All right. So who's here? We've got a few more. Y'all go ahead and say hello. Okay, so hey everyone. Okay, so Brechnia, hi. Nora's here. Okay, Nora, a regular. Very, very good. Okay, remember, tell your friends that we're live. All right, Kyle's here. Excellent. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to get a poll started. Remember, go ahead and ask questions. Nora, you've always got great questions. So let's go ahead and get those questions asked, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of see where everyone is. Let's see. So what are you studying this week? All right. So as far as that goes, y'all feel free to offer that in the chat as well. I'd love to see the chat really kind of pick up tonight in this session. All right. So what are you studying this week? The Reformation. Hey there, Kyle. If I hadn't said hi to you already, I might have, but I forget. I don't multitask very well. Okay. I would think that everyone's done with the Renaissance. So let's see. Reformation, absolutism. Maybe scientific revolution or the Enlightenment. Okay. So Emily, y'all had some hurricane time. Okay, yeah, and Emily, of course, is a teacher, so I've got to remember, got to be ready. I'm ready this time, Emily. I'm ready for you with those teacher questions. All right, last time it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, what? All right, so scientific revolution, Enlightenment, or something else. Okay, so as far as that goes, and I just finished up absolutism in my class. Of course, I'm on a semester class, so I should probably be moving a little faster than I am, but I've always been the type that I'd rather feel like I've done things like adequately than think about like how fast am I going to move through this thing or something like that. Yes, and Kyle, that's pretty much like when I say absolutism, like I include like constitutionalism. I was thinking like Amanda wants a title for all of these sessions, and so I was like, okay, let's constitutionalism. So I'll give priority to questions about the Dutch Republic and also to Stuart England. But it looks like we've got a small group, so just like last week, it's going to be a matter of I'll be able to answer anything that's asked really in a group this small. Now, there is a little bit of a discussion in the Fiveable teacher chat, like we're wondering, and this is a good question to put to y'all. And Emily, this may be something, especially for people that are teachers with us, is once a week like too much right now during this time of the year? That's something I think that we're kind of interested in hearing about from teachers and students. Should this be something right now that's like bi-weekly, or perhaps should these be like 30-minute sessions or something like that? Which, of course, if we're done in 30 minutes, then we're done in 30 minutes. I mean, I'm basically here to answer questions. So it's like if this thing doesn't last a whole hour, then I'm fine with that. Okay, so let's go ahead now. I don't see any questions coming up yet, so let's go ahead and get those in there. Now, I can give y'all a little preview. I've got a video that I've made the script for. So I think that while I'm waiting on questions to come in, I'm going to kind of show y'all like a video that or at least kind of the script for a video that I have basically scripted, that sort of thing. Sometimes in the evening I can get kind of funny like that, but I've created all the slides for a video on Fiveable's channel on the Edict of Nantes, and that also kind of goes into the age of absolutism. So of course, remember, go ahead and ask your questions, but I'm going to go ahead and chat with y'all because this goes into some of the absolutism, and we'll see what people want to talk about while I'm doing that. So get your questions in, and I'm going to chat about the Edict of Nantes. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the Edict of Nantes and also the two successor edicts that follow it. So a little bit of review here. Now, first of all, we've got Henry IV of France, formerly Henry of Navarre. So the Edict of Nantes was issued by Henry IV of France in 1598. Whoa, 1898. We skipped a little time there, didn't we? 1598, and it granted toleration and civil rights to Huguenots, who were French Calvinists, while maintaining Catholicism as the state religion. Now, one thing I want to do here with these edicts is really go into the POV, the context, the audience, and purpose. So Henry was what I call a recovering Huguenot. Now, he was a Huguenot nobleman, but then when he became king of France, he converted to Catholicism because France is a Catholic country, overwhelmingly Catholic, and needed to be ruled by a Catholic. So I call him a recovering Huguenot, but also a politique, or as some of my students have said in the past, politicue, which it is a written test. So as a politique, Henry is issuing this because he's less concerned about religion and more concerned about much more concerned about keeping the country together. So the context here is the French Wars of Religion. And so French people have been killing each other over religion, and this is really kind of his solution to that. Now, he is addressing the French nation, maybe specifically a Huguenot community that feels betrayed by Henry's conversion to Catholicism. Now, the purpose here would be to end bloodshed and civil war. So the Edict of Nantes had in mind that, okay, let's go ahead and tolerate Huguenots here, 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 and here, and in these instances, and maybe we can stop killing each other and we can get on with building France into a more powerful country. Now, of course, Louis XIV was Henry's grandson, and Louis issued the Edict of Fontainebleau. I don't know. It's a written test, and I'm not very good at French, but before I record this video, I probably should look that up and figure out the correct pronunciation. So that was in 1685, nearly a century after Henry IV issued the Edict of Nantes. And so Louis XIV of France revoked the Edict of Nantes, and of course, this was part of his program of one king, one law, one faith. And so the point of view here is that Louis, unlike his grandfather, who converted to Catholicism as a politique, thinking, okay, this is better for the country, Louis was a devout Catholic. He truly believed that the Catholic religion was the religion, was the correct faith. All right. So, and also he's a divine right absolutist. So part of this whole, divine right thing is the whole thing about divine right is that God has put me in this position and that I have certain obligations to God. So the context now, while Henry IV had issued the Edict of Nantes as after the French Wars of Religion, this is a time where the Reformation has really been over for some time. Like this is 1685. So this is nearly 40 years after the 30 Years' War is over. And there's been a resurgence of Catholicism in continental Europe. And so in France, the Huguenots were not the same kind of force that they had been 100 years before that. And also, Louis was at war against Protestant countries. He had fought a war against the Dutch in the previous time. And then you can see also that at this time, this is after, this is getting like right before 1688, where you've got the Glorious Revolution. But Louis is fighting wars against Protestant countries. Now, his audiences, of course, the French nation again, but possibly also, probably, I think likely, also the papacy, that Louis wanted to be on good terms with the papacy and saw himself as really kind of, as France is becoming this great power and the most powerful nation in Europe, that the papacy, Louis sees himself as really like the protector of Catholicism in Europe. And the purpose here was to unify France, this one king, one law, one faith, not a nation that is divided. And this is important here in thinking in terms of nation building with absolutism, that Louis wants to see not a patchwork that is taking oaths to a king, but really what Louis is envisioning is what's going to come to fruition much later under Napoleon. And let's not forget as well Louis's responsibility to God as he sees it, that Louis believes that God has placed him in this position, and certainly he doesn't want to go before the judgment seat of Christ. And Jesus is like, hey, Louis, why did you let your subjects practice a false religion? That's not something that, that's not good, Louis, and maybe you have to go to hell for that because you let all those other people go to hell for being separated from the church. So remember, Louis was truly a devout Catholic. Now, this is an edict I didn't even know about until last week, but I was researching this a bit more. And Frederick William, the great elector, about a week later issued the Edict of Potsdam. And so Frederick William, the elector of Brandenburg, when he saw that Louis was kicking Huguenots out of France, he invited these persecuted French Protestants to settle in Brandenburg. Now, why is he going to do that? Now, first of all, his point of view is that he was a Protestant prince and specifically a Calvinist. So where Louis is setting himself up as the protector of Catholicism, Frederick William is really like the most high-profile Calvinist ruler. Now, remember also that he's in a Protestant kingdom, but he's a fan of religious toleration as well. So the context here is, of course, this Edict of Fontainebleau and the 30 Years' War. Now, the 30 Years' War has ended a few decades before that. Brandenburg had been demolished by the 30 Years' War. A lot of the battles were happening there. And so his country was really depleted in a lot of ways. And so he wanted to reach out to these French Protestants that were exiled by Louis XIV and entice them to settle, not just out of feeling sorry for them, but let's remember that Calvinists they're known for their very sober work ethic. And so these are, the kind of immigrants that you want to bring into your country. These are people, a lot of them had skills and new trades and that sort of thing. So he wanted to attract skilled workers to rebuild his country and to turn, basically to turn Brandenburg, Prussia into a great power, which of course it would become under his successors. And certainly he has a motive to protect Protestants who, especially Calvinists, who are close to his heart. And remember that the 30 Years' War in the Peace of Westphalia made Calvinism one of the acceptable religions in the Holy Roman Empire. That before the 30 Years' War, the rulers in the Holy Roman Empire could choose between Lutheranism and Catholicism. And so now, here is this high-profile Calvinist ruler who is reaching out. And so with that, we've got Henry IV of France issuing the Edict of Nantes, a tolerant edict, but with the objective of making peace. Louis XIV issuing an intolerant edict, the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, with the purpose of building an absolutist and Catholic state in France. And then finally, Frederick William of Brandenburg, the great elector, with the Edict of Potsdam, issuing a tolerant edict, but a tolerant edict also with a point to build a strong state from his war-torn principality. And so that's what I'm working on right now, and that should be uploaded to Fiveable's channel in the coming days. All right, and while I was doing that, we've got some questions coming in. Awesome, awesome. Okay. Nora, let's see. What do we have here? Okay. So, all right, excellent, excellent. So our book, yeah, so mention this. Do I have my slides online? Okay, so as far as that goes, sometimes I'll give I'll give Amanda these slides, and she'll email those out. And then of course this I plan to put on Fiveable's channel. The ones that I show you in these sessions that are mine, a lot of those are for purchase, but also they're on display on the lectures that I've got on YouTube. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the questions we've got here. All right, and let's see. Now, Kyle, that is an excellent question. Okay, an excellent question. And that's really my tone of voice for people who know me. That's one of those things, kind of like when Emily asked me some of these questions that she was asking last week, that the Jansenists, they were a, now this is the thing. I'm going to tell you that it is not likely. It is not likely that you're going to see the Jansenist that on the AP exam. Like, I would not expect you to see that. Now, the Jansenists, I don't know if I would consider them, see, then this is something, maybe I need to make a video on this just for fun, that the Jansenists, this was a faction that I don't know if I would necessarily call them heretics or not, but they were a group that, you know, was kind of out of the mainstream, you know, Catholicism there. Let me just take a look there. Okay, so they emphasized original sin. Okay, so basically, this was a group. It was, you know, it was Catholics, I believe, that they, you know, so Jansen. Okay, wait. Okay, so it was a distinct movement away from the Catholic Church. All right, which was a haven for writers. Yada yada yada. Was opposed by many in the Catholic hierarchy. The Jesuits weren't very fond of him. Now, as you can see, I'm looking this up, and it's because it's really, I've just never seen this come up in the AP Euro curriculum, but it is a great opportunity for, you know, us to delve into things that may be good beyond the exam. Let's see. Yeah, this is Kyle. That's the problem here. That it's one of those things that really just needs some further inquiry. But at the same time, I don't think, like, let me go. Let's see, AP Euro course description. And this is often something that I do that's not a bad idea. Sometimes when you're trying to figure out like how big of a deal is this, what I do is I pull up the AP Euro course description and I'll just do a quick search. Okay, so and I don't see Jansenist anywhere in there. So it's very unlikely. Like, oh, I mean, it's just, yeah. But that's it. It's really kind of difficult, and this is something that I'll take a look at, because sometimes we've got to remember as well that there are some people that don't necessarily consider themselves to be heretics, but then the church will consider them heretics. Now, so yeah, like, you know, Luther, Calvin, Henry VIII, that kind of stuff you need to know. The Jansenist, probably not so much as something. But I do think that we could talk about that in the sense that Louis was definitely someone who was a champion of Catholic orthodoxy. Okay, that if there was any group that was theologically, because from what I can see here with the Jansenists, that they are, from what I can see here, is that you know, yeah, but they've definitely called it a heresy. You know, as far as there are Calvinist undertones here, and of course, remember that when we think about like the Reformation, that yeah, so basically that's what the Jesuits and you know, the Catholics are saying about Jansenism, that this is very much like, this just seems a lot like Calvinism, which is really on the opposite side of the you know, of the free will spectrum from Catholicism. Because remember that the Catholic Church teaches that people have free will, that baptism restores free will and gets rid of original sin, and that people are able to make choices. So Jansen is kind of looking into some of that, like total depravity and that sort of thing. So, Emily, one thing, let's go, you know, this is actually, I found this website called Study Pool, you know, which I was looking at. It's an article that said like 5 websites that are revolutionizing education. And the Study Pool website is something where you basically, it's looking to me like you're paying people to do your home, you're paying people to do your homework for you or something. Like, you got a question, you're just like, okay, $5 if somebody will write this 500 words and turn it into me tomorrow or whatever. And I saw one, I'm just kind of curious about this website, and I saw one that was talking about what is better, compare a federal government with a Republican government. And of course, I signed up to answer this question, and I was like, once I did that, I was like, wait, you know, but I did it anyway. So I was like, okay, let me explain this. And our government in the United States is both federal and Republican. Now, the French government today is Republican, but not federal, and so you can be a bit of both. So as far as that goes, that absolutism and constitutionalism, these are. Oh, right. But the thing is, I don't think they're going to be willing to pay enough. I don't know, but it's interesting. It's interesting, man. I'm trying to figure out what exactly this is. But the thing is that France had a mercantilist system, and so did Britain. The British had a mercantilist system as well. Now, of course, I think that the mercantilist economy, as I said in my lecture on mercantilism, I think that it goes very well with absolutism because mercantilism is a regulated economy. Okay, so it definitely has a role for the state to play in the allocation of economic resources. Whereas I think in a constitutional government, that economic liberalism, Adam Smith, the invisible hand. I think that a market economy works better in a constitutional state because a market economy and a constitutional state are both about limited government. But at the same time, like when we look at U.S. history, I mean, there's certainly the British between the time of the French and Indian War and the American Revolution, they're trying to force mercantilist policies on their colonies. And so we really don't see like the triumph of free trade until, I would say in the 19th century, because you're dealing with like the repeal of the Corn Laws and all of that. So yeah, I wouldn't think about those as mutually exclusive. Now, even the Dutch, I think we kind of will oversimplify things a bit and say that the Dutch are the one. I mean, the Dutch had the lowest shipping rates. So really the Dutch didn't have to practice mercantilism per se because everybody wanted to trade with them because they had the best shipping rates. And so as far as that goes, I would divide the question and I wouldn't necessarily think about that. Now, in some and also depending on in some cases, mercantilism, it's kind of like with Stalin, like in the 5-year plans. Like the initial 5-year plans that Stalin put out there were actually very successful. If your economy is a complete wreck and somebody comes in and manages it and has some goals and stuff like that, and it's like, okay, we're getting there. But then there's a point where it stops being successful, where the central planning is really going to only get somebody so far. So yeah, I would say just divide those up and think about that. And so you've got absolutism and constitutionalism, and then you've got mercantilism versus liberalism. And eventually, like I said, it's really not going to be until like the 19th century, where the mid 19th century, when Britain finally makes a full commitment to free trade. All right. So as far as that goes, Emily, great question here. And I'm thinking you're probably looking at the Stuarts, because you're dealing with when you've got James the First and Charles the First. Okay. Now remember the Elizabethan religious settlement. Okay. Now this was essentially for a survey level course, which is about as deep as I get in a lot of this stuff, that this is an effort to kind of placate everyone and find something. Of course, you're not going to find something that everybody's going to like, clearly, but the Elizabethan religious settlement was like, okay, we're going to be a Protestant country, but this Protestant church will still have a lot of elements of Catholicism. Okay, so that's what's going to be, this settlement here. And so high church Anglicanism, okay, which there are some people I know who are Episcopalian, and one of the guys joked with me that like if you're like in a high church Episcopal church, he said that there's a joke that if you can see the altar through the incense, it's not church. And so that is high church Anglicanism is about the incense, about the ceremony. It's something that has a lot more in common with a Catholic mass. Whereas low church, I would think about like, if you think about today, like Pentecostal and non-denominational like churches that, are very like charismatic and less ceremonial and more spontaneous. That is low church. So Calvinist, if you think about it, like Calvinist would be like low church because it's about getting getting all the fancy stuff out of the church. So think about high church as fancy. Okay. So when we think about high church, we're thinking about fancy. When we're thinking about low church, we're thinking about something considerably less fancy. And so it was during the reign of, I believe, Charles the First, which of course, James First, Charles the First, they kind of, one after the other, same kind of period. But as far as that Archbishop William Laud, this was somebody, and this is part of the sticking point, because what happens here after the Elizabethan settlement, there are these Puritans and separatists who were like, these English Calvinists that are like, we don't like the settlement because this church isn't Protestant enough. It just seems too Catholic. And because of that, you have this conflict, and you've got the Puritans and the separatists on one side, but then on the other side, James the First and Charles the First are, and Archbishop Laud, they're being very, very adamant about high church Anglicanism. So they're not really willing to compromise at all with with the Calvinists. And no, I don't think I would classify the Tudors as the Tudors are really more in the new monarchs kind of category. So when you look at, for example, Henry VII, okay, he's beginning the Tudor dynasty. He's really kind of the classic, like when you think about Henry VII is the one who is creating this more centralized administration. Now, Henry VIII is acting like a new monarch when he makes a national church, because the new monarchies, you think about like Ferdinand and Isabella, who then expelled the Muslim and Jewish population from Spain. And so Henry VIII is really kind of acting like a new monarch. But remember that the Act of Supremacy was ratified by Parliament. Now, Parliament was really, in a lot of cases during the Tudor era, really kind of a rubber stamp for the monarch. But we wouldn't say, if Henry were an absolute monarch, it'd be like Louis XIV revoking the Edict of Nantes. And so Henry VIII, what we see out of Henry VIII is that he was so when you look at Henry VIII, he is going to Parliament and he says, I want this ratified. I want Parliament Sam supreme head of the church. And then we look at Elizabeth. Now, this is in the Elizabeth I DBQ, that when we look at Queen Elizabeth and Parliament says, we're not going to give her the title of supreme head. We're going to give her the title of supreme governor of the Church of England. And so that's what you're looking at there. But yeah, I would put the Tudors more in the new monarchs category than absolute. And James I and Charles I are trying to be absolute, and it doesn't work out. So really, I wouldn't truly classify any English monarch as an absolute monarch, even though James I and Charles I certainly tried. All right, and William and Mary, thank you very much. Emily is the MVP tonight, making sure that we've got some questions. Nora, any questions for you? Any questions or from you? Okay, I'd like to hear from you. So ask us some questions. Now, what was William and Mary's political agenda prior to the Glorious Revolution? All right, so the thing is, what we need to remember about William III, he was the stadtholder of, not the stadtholder even of the Netherlands, the stadtholder of Holland, Zeeland, Utrecht, Gelderland, and Overijssel. Okay, so really, and if you take a look at my video, what is a stadtholder? Okay, because in that video, I go, no, go right ahead, Nora, ask some questions. I'd love to take a question from you. I want to make sure that don't feel like you have to stay on one thing, but basically, the Dutch Republic. Now, when I talk about constitutionalism, one thing that I think we have to look at is, first of all, when you look at England, okay, so England, they don't have to be absolutist because they're not threatened with invasion. So you think about it, like, why does absolutism catch on in Prussia, Brandenburg, but it doesn't catch on in Britain? And so really the answer there is because Brandenburg Prussia like needed absolutism. Without it, they weren't going to be able to build a strong state. And so then in England, they've got the Navy, and they're not scared of being invaded, and so they don't have to worry about keeping up with France and that sort of thing. So they don't have to. I mean, I think that's the big answer there, is there's really never any kind of urgency that makes the English like want to give up their representative body and their Magna Carta or anything like that. So, and then in the Netherlands, it is the situation there is it wasn't a country, okay? That the Netherlands really was a confederation, that it was a confederation of provinces, really a lot like what's interesting to me about the Dutch Republic. And this wasn't the first thing that I latched onto when I started teaching Euro. For several years, I barely mentioned it. And of course, then I had a chance to go to the Netherlands and just fell in love with the place. But it's not altogether different from like the United States under like the Articles of Confederation. I mean, it's like every state had its own representative body, and every state got to say if they ratified the stadtholder or not. There were certain times where there was one person who was stadtholder of some provinces and another person who was stadtholder of some of the other provinces. So it was really just a hodgepodge and kind of a mess when you look at it. And that so the thing is, William of Orange was not a king. He's somebody, now he was a head of states. Now I call him a head of states because there's really nothing that we would be able to say that like the Dutch Republic was not a sovereign state. It was a confederation. And so when he goes to England, it's actually a step up for him. And he continues to be the stadtholder over there. And this is something I want to research a little more. But I've been told when talking about him that when he went back, I mean, he had to go back and forth a bit. Okay, so he was expected to spend some time in the Netherlands, and so he would go to the Netherlands, and they're like, well, we're not going to treat this guy like a king. He's not our king. The Dutch don't have a king. They've got this stadtholder, this person who has authority, but isn't necessarily someone who is like the stadtholdership wasn't hereditary. This is something that when a stadtholder died, then, and there were even stadtholderless periods that they would say, we're just not going to have another stadtholder after him, which I believe, the stadtholderless periods were before and after William III's stadtholdership, which I tell you what's cool is that William III of England was also William III stadtholder, or William III of Orange. So that's kind of cool there, the stadtholder there. So he didn't have, it's not like James I and James VI of, James I of England, James VI of Scotland, where he's got two Roman numerals. It's the same one. So that's that's the thing that he was used to constitutionalism. So of all the people to come over and take over, it's like, hey, Parliament's given him probably more authority than he's used to having as the stadtholder of the Dutch Republic. Got me talking about the Dutch. I love it. All right. And so as far as how does the Dutch East India Company impact the Netherlands standing in Europe? Now, this is something that I know people who could answer this one a lot better than me, okay? Because, but the Dutch East India Company is really like Indonesia is pretty much like, if we think about there are a lot of parallels between the British and the Dutch in the sense that they both gave corporations a great deal of power, like rather than the state. The Dutch East India Company, the VOC, as they tend to call it over there. But the Dutch East India Company pretty much like ran its own show over there, that like the Dutch government wasn't really involved in these colonies. So you had this company that was traded on a stock exchange. And so, their empire, quote unquote, they controlled this land in Indonesia. But at the same time, the Dutch really, they're not settling a lot of people over there. So there is a lot of trade going on there, but they're not necessarily settling a lot of people. But in the 17th century, for much of it, they are the powerhouse, like really the trade powerhouse. Now there is a DBQ that I just assigned my students this week on the decline of the Dutch Republic. And Emily, I think if you're on my email list, you've got access to my AP Euro teachers page on my website. If you're not familiar with that, feel free to contact me by email and we'll talk about that. But I've got a lot of DBQs up. And this, so that's on the teachers page is the Dutch Republic DBQ. And it specifically goes into the, you've got room to get the documents side by side, put them in categories like what are the reasons for the decline of the Dutch Republic and going into that. So yeah, now that's the Duchy, I think the main things like the Dutch Republic's not typically going to be like a huge thing on the exam, but as long as students understand that, the Dutch had the lowest shipping rates, they had a stock exchange. You have the Dutch East India Company, which was a private company that, pretty much oversaw like most of the Dutch, the Dutch economic interest and colonial interest in the East Indies. That should be enough for the exam, but definitely something that I want to research a little more on my own. And then we see that, how does the expansion of European commerce accelerate the growth? Oh, wow. Okay, of a worldwide economic network. That is, wow. Did you phrase that question yourself, Emily? That is a, yeah, you notice like these questions about like global economics and trade and stuff like that. Those do tend to like stump me a little bit. But the Europeans really, it's like when you look at the age of exploration, they're the first. Oh, okay, yeah, that. All right, yeah, we'll just the way that I knew that like came from something. Okay, yeah, there are some of those things in the concept outline that I'm just like, I just don't feel like fooling with that right now. And I think that, they try to like globalize this course and it's not like I don't know. Some of these things I just don't have the patience for. And I don't think students do. I mean, I think if we were to go and just nitpick through the concept outline with a fine-tooth comb and try to teach all of it, like there's a lot of this stuff that would really bore our kids like just to death. But really, I mean, the Europeans are the first ones to really just start these all water routes, and so they're pretty much controlling them for a long time. And we even that I think that's like, if we think about the age of exploration and the Columbian exchange, and it's like they try to come up with this fancy language, but I think that's fine. That, when we think about the age of exploration and the Columbian exchange, and definitely. Okay, that sounds excellent to me, Emily, and we'll just leave it at that. I think that's awesome. Okay, so as far as that goes, really specific question. Thanks for warning me, Kyle. Now, the other thing, Kyle, that I want to make clear is that we want to make sure that we remember that these textbooks were not, and I haven't read the rest of your question, okay, but some of these textbook things, they're not written for the exam. So there are going to be some things in your textbook that it's like, okay, you don't have to go quite that deep. But this question I think is actually a good one, because it is something that, it's like Prussia, or Brandenburg Prussia, was really like, I mean, it's really what Frederick William, the great elector, did. Okay. I mean, this is like, Prussia is really like, when you think about today, that Germany is the largest economy in Europe. in the 20th century, like Germany fought two wars where the only reason that Germany like lost those wars is because of the like combined like forces of the great powers of Europe and the United States. Okay. I mean, you think about it, like if the United States had stayed neutral in those wars, I mean, Germany was really, I mean, I think that, Woodrow Wilson was hoping with the United States coming into World War I, we'd make the world safe for democracy. But without the United States entering, then it may have ended in a stalemate and you wouldn't have had Article 231, the Treaty of Versailles, and maybe no World War II or the rise of totalitarianism. So, to say that is just, we think about like the creation of what is today the largest economy in Europe, what was in the 19th and late 19th and early 20th century, the greatest military power in Europe. And it started off as these two little principalities, like one in Poland and one in the Holy Roman Empire, that weren't even connected with each other. So Prussia, like what we call Prussia, I mean, Prussia was actually in Poland and Brandenburg was in the Holy Roman Empire. And so what happened, yeah, so Brandenburg was a principality in the Holy Roman Empire, and that's why when we talk about Frederick William, the great elector, we don't call him King Frederick William because he did not rule something that was big enough to be called a kingdom. But now Frederick the great elector's son was then, like, Prussia was elevated to a kingdom, and that was really because of so the great elector, because he was one of the people who could vote for the Holy Roman Emperor. Now remember, after 1648, now I'm not a specialist in the Holy Roman Empire necessarily, but what I think is important is after 1648 we see that the Holy Roman Empire is less of a thing, even less than it was beforehand. So there's going to be less that's going to stop someone from saying, hey, this thing that I've got right here, it's a kingdom. Who's going to stop me? And because really what's happening as well is that although Prussia, and this is a statistic I cite in my video on the matter, and I always like to mention, is at the time Prussia was the 12th largest country, or Prussia Brandenburg or Brandenburg Prussia, the 12th largest country in Europe. And it becomes basically they build the fourth largest military. And so that's where, the Prussians, it's all about, this, it's very much, about the militarism. And Prussia, it was realized that, like, basically, I think it was the Soldier King that said that, if you have a big enough war chest and the ability to get your army around, you can do whatever you want. And that's what they did. They saw a path to greatness through absolutism. And that's really, like I was saying, that with the English, it wasn't a big deal. Okay. So with the English, it wasn't, they didn't have to worry about being invaded, but Prussia had just been destroyed, or Brandenburg rather, been destroyed in the 30 Years' War. All right. So let's see. All right, this is, oh, Nora, that is an exciting question. Okay, I am very, very excited about this one. Like, seriously. Okay, let me just gather my thoughts just a little bit there, and maybe just get a little sip of water, right? Okay, get a little sip of water as well. Oh man, and then Kyle comes in with Peter the Great. Oh, Kyle, you know how to get me. But I already said that I was going to answer Nora's question. So I'm going to answer this, even though I thought about just putting Nora on the back burner because somebody just asked about Peter the Great. All right. So the thing is science and religion. And, we're the thing is that this is actually something that's really debatable. Okay, is there tension between science and religion? Does there have to be tension between science and religion? Okay, so for example, like my daughter just got a Bible at church a few weeks ago. And so I figured, I was like, let's open it up and take a look at it. And I started reading her the first chapter of Genesis. And I had to explain to her. Now, this isn't how it was told to me, of course, but I explained to her, I was like, you see here where they're saying that God separated the upper waters from the lower waters. Okay. And so essentially, the people that wrote the creation story in the first chapter of Genesis, they believed the sky was made out of water and there was a firmament. Okay. Like there's this, God basically put a dome around the earth. And so there are waters underneath, there are waters above, and then we've got like the air, and then the sun, the moon, the stars are like all in the dome with us. And, which you think about it, it's like we can say, what, are they stupid? It's like, no, they're actually kind of smart. They saw the sky's blue, water's blue, and water comes out of the sky. So the sky must have water above it, and God makes it rain because he keeps water up there. And I'm telling my daughter, who, I'm raising her as a Christian, but I said that this story was an attempt to explain, the creation of the world by people who hadn't seen it, and they really had a very different idea of what the world was than we have. And the reason that I relate that story is because I don't necessarily want my daughter to believe like there are certain like religious faiths. Like I know, for example, the Catholic Church, the official position of the Roman Catholic Church is that a Christian can believe in human evolution. Now, not necessarily in a Darwinian sense, because I think that, in Darwinian sense, strictly speaking, like the whole natural select, there are things but theistic evolution is not considered heretical by a lot of Christian groups. Now, are there some people who have more of a fundamentalist persuasion in our society today that they say the world was created in 6 days? It says so in the Bible, and to believe in human evolution is against the Bible. So therefore, but see, the thing is that I think that the tension between science and religion is often self-inflicted. That Francis Bacon, now, and this is the thing about the scientific revolution, is like there were church people who got triggered by Galileo, but Galileo wasn't trying to trigger the church. Galileo was a sincere professing Catholic. Sir Francis Bacon said that a little bit of philosophy, or what he's talking about, science, because remember, they talked about science as natural philosophy. Francis Bacon said a little bit of philosophy makes somebody inclined toward atheism, but a lot of philosophy incline someone toward theism. And so the thing is that Sir Francis Bacon is saying there's not tension between science and religion unless you create it. And so Galileo, when he's having problems with the church, is like, look, what if the Earth's not the center of the universe? Then we have to reconsider some of the things that we teach. But also, I think the bigger thing is not so much the church; it goes past the church, because it's just like with human evolution. Whether it's Galileo saying that the Earth is not the center of the universe, or somebody saying that, like, look, doesn't look like human beings were created in their current form. It looks like we evolved from lower species. The initial response is to feel a little less special. Like, I thought I was at the center of the universe. There's like an inherent kind of narcissism in all of us. And that's kind of, a certain amount of it's healthy, but that's the thing. So I think one of the things here is, to think about, how much tension is there really between science and religion, and how much tension is really is created. Because certainly, like, I don't really in my day-to-day life as a professing Christian, I don't think like, oh, that science is bad and that goes against my faith. It's like I tend to try to integrate like my faith with certain elements of science. I think that sometimes we get over scientific. Hopefully that answered your question. It's a topic I like to talk about, but definitely something that is worth considering. And I spent a lot of today's class talking about that, especially how, like, astrology astrology, and even today, like, people, look at, there are some of you that might have, when you get into a relationship, you're like, what's this person's sign? Let me look up the compatibility. That sort of thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with a little bit of mysticism here and there. There's a reason why this stuff takes place. When people on Twitter are talking about when Mercury's in retrograde, it's like, hey, I mean, it doesn't sound very scientific, but I think there may be something to some of that. I mean, some strange things happen when Mercury's in retrograde, do they not? All right. So as far as that goes, how much do we need to know about Peter the Great and the Great Northern War? Okay. So as far as Peter the Great, what you're really looking at here. Let's see. If I go to the wait, I think I've got the AP Euro course description. I've got so many tabs open. That's just how I roll. Now the Great Northern War itself is never mentioned in the now. That doesn't mean you don't have to know it. You don't have to know the name of it, okay? But the thing is that Peter the Great, what we really need to understand, okay, and what we would use the Great Northern War in order to let's see. So okay. So let me just kind of go into here, because I think the Great Northern War is a great illustrative example of how, like, what we know about absolutists. Okay. So absolutists are fighting wars in order to expand their power, right? That Peter the Great had a vision of westernizing Russia. Okay, Peter the Great wants to westernize Russia, and to do that, he's fighting wars to get a hold of warm water ports. Now we see here absolute monarchies limited the nobility's participation in governance, but preserved the aristocracy's social position and legal privileges. So Peter the Great is an example of that. How you've got this, this more top-down government that's forming. And then Peter the Great's westernizing of Russia. Okay, so looking at these things here. Now, expanded military. Okay, so really the Great Northern War fits under the umbrella of Peter the Great's expanded military. So Peter the Great is expanding the military and building a modern Russian army on the Prussian model. So when we look at, Russian army, Prussian model, but when we look at, for example, like the Streltsy, okay, this musketeer corps that was very, very powerful and influential, and kind of like almost like the Praetorian Guard in ancient Rome, maybe similar to that, this is something that the Streltsy, this is how things were before, but Peter is, Peter is modernizing the military. And why he's doing that is he wants to conquer territory to get warm water ports. So it is very useful to know that the Great Northern War was fought against Sweden, Charles the 12th. I don't think that's asking too much to know who is fighting against. And you've got the Battle of Narva and the Battle of Poltava. These two battles in the Great Northern War that were decisive, especially the Battle of Poltava, which was Peter's decisive victory. And this was made possible by Peter modernizing Russia. And because of that victory at Poltava, Peter was able to have his window to the west, his warm water port, so to speak. So I would say that, I've got a little video on the Great Northern War that just kind of takes you through. And I filmed it one day with my phone when it was snowing, when my channel was still kind of young. It's good memories. Oh, my daughter's so adorable in that video. She still is, but she's like 8 now, and she was like 4 then. Oh, my goodness. All right. So one day you'll be a parent. All right. Yeah. Take a look at it. I had a lot of fun building that. Okay. Yes, yes. Okay, yeah, that's basically yes, Emily, Google Translate if it ever that's one. I've Google Translate's gotten pretty good. Like, I've gotten where I can like put in like phrases in just about any language, and it's actually I mean, I don't know if I'd try to translate like whole like paragraphs and stuff like that, but yeah. So the thing is, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that right now, because my French is terrible. But yes, one king, one law, one faith. Donna's here. here. All right. Donna, good to see you, which, we need to get some of your students back here. But yeah, so, and the thing is, yeah, and teachers, you may be hearing from Fiveable sometime soon. Like I said, like there has been some discussion about just we've got some true believers who are here every week, but there is some concern about we did have more people at these things, and there is some concern about should we go to a bi-weekly setup or something like that. So if you hear from Fiveable about that, like make sure that you get back to them and let them know your opinion. Maybe talk to your students. Like, would they be more likely to attend these things if they were bi-weekly rather than every week? All right. So as far as that stuff, okay, got it. Now, nightly study hall. What's nightly study hall? I'm like, thank you very much, Emily. I'm curious now. Nightly study hall. All right. So this is an easy one here. All right, Brechnia. I tell you, that is such a cool little name you got there. I guess that's not like your real given name, but it's great. So the Rump Parliament. Okay, so now I don't know what Pride's Purge is, but I guess I can kind of guess. Okay, it's a boarding school. I want to hear more about this. All right, well, that's awesome. That is your name? I tell you, that is an awesome name. Okay, so Pride's Purge, which I'm guessing, okay, because the Rump Parliament, I'm not going to stay. I mean, if my daughter were here, she'd think it was really funny if I just said it's kind of like somebody's booty or something, But the thing is, the Rump, okay, the Rump is like the hind quarters, and the Rump Parliament is what's left over, okay. So it's like basically, Charles, Charles before that, but Oliver Cromwell, ended up purging Parliament to where Parliament really like it's one of those things where the cure was worse than the disease. All right. Because what happened was the protectorate was not a parliamentary republican government. Okay. So as far as that goes, Cromwell was basically ruling as a military dictator. So the Rump Parliament was the parliament that's left over. I'm to think that, yeah, Pride's Purge must be where they got rid of the parliamentarians that were not on board with Oliver Cromwell. So that's what you're looking at there. So the Rump Parliament is the parliament in the later years of the protectorate that's basically just got Cromwell's yes men left in it. And would I be able to talk about? Oh, and one thing you want to note is the radicalization. Okay, so we want to note that for example, like the Roundheads like had actually some moderate people, and it's a lot of times people compare, and we've seen questions on exams asking students to compare the English Revolution, okay, as far as the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, all of that, and the French Revolution. So when you look at the English Civil War, Sir Thomas Fairfax, for example, he was the original commander of the New Model Army. But at a certain point, he was pushed. I forget if he was pushed out or he resigned. But Thomas Fairfax was not somebody. I mean, he was not radical enough to command this army anymore after that. And would I be able to talk about the religious wars and people that were key to the Reformation? Okay. Elizabeth, we are running out of time, but remember, take a look at my YouTube channel because I have a whole, if you type in Tom Ritchie Reformation, you'll see my Reformation playlist, and that's got, Luther, Calvin, English Reformation, French Wars of Religion. Then it's got the 30 Years' War. So it's got a whole smattering of all that. So yeah, do remember, y'all take a look at my YouTube channel. And also remember, ladies and gentlemen, now some of you are subscribers to Fiveable. Some of you are here through your teacher. Now, if you're just a person that's here watching these streams and you're enjoying it, go to fiveable.me. Okay, fiveable.me. And when you go there, you can see some information about subscribing to Fiveable, which, if I believe right now, it's only like $15 or $20 for the whole year. And it gets you into live streams for every subject. And also, you can go back and see the archive. Like, people who are here for free right now can check out the live sessions, but they can't see the archive. So if you subscribe, then if you missed one, you can go back and watch it later. So if you're not currently subscribed, either through yourself or through your teacher, make sure to go to fiveable.me, and that'll get you a subscription for the rest of the academic year. So make sure to do that, because the other thing is the price of that product will go up, because when we get to like March and April and May, people are going to be paying money for reviews. And so that's that. All right. Well, yeah, I think that we're good. Just that's one of those things they've wondered. And I think that once we had a few more people show up, I was a little bit panicked at first, because it was like when it was 8 o'clock or it was 9 o'clock, we only had like 3 people in here, and I was like, uh-oh. But we've had a good group. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, good seeing y'all tonight. And remember, I've said before that it's like I haven't made a decision yet, and it's actually having that 8 to 9 hour to like put my daughter to bed and all that is actually good. So for right now, we're going to keep doing it at 9. But if you ever get an announcement that says like, hey, these are going to be at 8 from now on, don't be like shocked or surprised. But for right now, we'll keep meeting weekly at 9 o'clock, unless otherwise noted. It's always a pleasure. Thank y'all for coming tonight.